She doesn't want you in the room, the security guard said, blocking the maternity wing door. Behind him stood Judith Weller, our HOA president, arms crossed, lips smug, clipboard in hand. She nodded once toward the hall, like I was some trespasser, not a husband, not a father, not the man whose wife was screaming his name from behind the door. "This is an HOA property," I said. "You don't get to ban me from my child's birth." Judith smiled like she was delivering mail. "Per the board's emergency ruling, your wife's medical transport violated curfew. Your presence during delivery is unauthorized HOA. Karen tried to kick my pregnant wife out of the delivery room, and she brought paperwork to make it happen. I didn't blink. You're going to regret enforcing this one. This building's network still pings to my server. The timestamp on your HOA's system is wrong, and I can prove it. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back." She blinked just once. I'd seen that moment 100 times, when someone realizes they aren't the smartest one in the room. I didn't need to threaten her, I just needed to get in. I'm Marcus Reeve. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I audit network security for federal infrastructure. My job is to find manipulation, loopholes, and digital lies. And right now, that makes me more dangerous than any lawyer she's ever met. That bench out front, the one that says, "Welcome home," my father carved it. I proposed to Selena on it the week we bought our house. That place, that piece of wood, holds more weight in my life than Judith's entire HOA rulebook, and it's the first place I plan to sit with my daughter in my arms. Selena wasn't just in labor, she was high risk. Placenta previa. Our OB told us weeks ago any delay could be fatal, but when the ambulance showed up to our home, the HOA's gate wouldn't open. Their system had flagged us, labeled us non-compliant for leaving during lockdown without a community pass. We had no choice. The EMT forced the gate open while Selena cried in pain. She bled on the stretcher. She passed out twice on the ride. And now that same HOA thought they had authority to keep me from holding her hand? The security guard shifted awkwardly. They said it's a liability issue. Something about coverage lapsing due to... Stop. I raised a hand. If she dies because of this, it's not an HOA violation. It's obstruction of emergency medical care. I've already sent notice to my attorney. Everything's time-stamped. I'm not bluffing. The door cracked open. A nurse appeared, face flushed. "She's asking for you," she said, voice barely audible. "We're prepping for an emergency C-section." "I'm not allowed in," I said, eyeing Judith. The nurse's eyes hardened. She glanced at the guard. "You're interfering with patient stabilization." "Policy is policy," Judith chirped. "I don't follow HOA policy," I said, pulling out my phone. "But federal court? That's something else. You'll want to review Title 18, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. Applies here." The guard looked suddenly unsure. Judith didn't move. I turned toward the hallway and felt it, the first flicker of something worse than fear, helplessness. My wife was behind a locked door, our child in danger, and a woman with a clipboard thought she was in charge. I looked out the glass toward the welcome home bench. My dad always said home wasn't walls. It was where your people were safe. They weren't safe. Not yet. "Where are you watching from?" I didn't leave. I couldn't. Not while Selena was inside with strangers, wires, and knives. I stood at the edge of the hallway, between the buzz of the ER doors and the unnatural silence from the maternity wing. Judith had retreated behind whatever hospital admin had agreed to take her side, for now. But I knew that wasn't the end. It was just another maneuver, another mask. Judith Weller had been the face of civic pride in Fox Ridge Hills ever since the last president moved to Arizona. She ran the HOA like it was a private fiefdom. Polished newsletters, town hall Zooms, and community welfare clauses slipped into every new amendment. But the truth was dirtier. She built her empire on fear and paperwork, targeting one family at a time. We got our first violation the week Selena's bump started showing. Unauthorized planting in community soil. It was lavender, in a border strip near the porch. We paid the $45 fine just to avoid drama. Next came the excessively loud mechanical use citation. That one hit while I was assembling the crib in our garage, after 7 p.m., apparently. I kept the drill wrapped in a towel after that. She didn't stop. By the time we hit our 8th notice, I stopped calling them violations. They were attacks. Death by 1,000 regulations. Trash bins too close to sidewalk. Front porch light exceeds lumen threshold. Unauthorized medical vehicle access during restricted hours. That last one nearly broke me. Selena had passed out at home during her 2nd trimester. Dehydration, low blood pressure. I called for help. The paramedics had to argue with the neighborhood gate system before they could enter. Judith later claimed it was glitching that day. I didn't buy it then. I sure as hell didn't buy it now. The woman had built a system that turned emergency services into optional benefits, contingent on compliance. A neighbor named Deborah told us her husband missed his dialysis window once because of HOA delay protocols. They moved 3 months later. I stayed. Not because I liked the fight, but because I had something Judith didn't. Data. I spent most days auditing internal infrastructures, flagging vulnerabilities, and walking government clients through security threats they didn't even know existed. I'd seen systems break, people cheat, and policies weaponized under the guise of order. So, when our HOA quietly rolled out a community event surveillance and compliance system 6 months ago, I didn't just ignore it. I mirrored it. I set up a ghost tap on the HOA's packet transfers. Nothing illegal, just passive metadata mirroring from the gateway router they installed near the clubhouse. All it did was log access times, network IDs, and basic command codes used by their admin panel. At first, it was just a curiosity, a nerd's habit. But then I saw something strange. Every time a household got a major violation, the metadata would spike, activity from Judith's credentials late at night. Timestamps mismatched the official reports by minutes, sometimes hours. That told me one thing. She wasn't just enforcing the rules, she was altering them after the fact. And if she altered the data that justified barring me from a hospital room, that was no longer an HOA issue. That was fraud, civil obstruction, possibly criminal. But to make it matter, I'd need more than logs and instincts. I'd need someone on the inside to say what she did. The hallway echoed behind me. I turned to see Dr. Kelvin Ma walking briskly out of the maternity wing, head down, shoulders stiff. He didn't look at me. He'd been our OB from the first ultrasound. Quiet, professional, but always honest. He'd been the one to warn us, off the record, that HOA interference might affect our emergency plans. Said the hospital had received outside influence on transport approvals. That was a month ago. Since then, he'd avoided specifics. I stepped in his path. Dr. Ma. He paused, eyes darting. She okay? He hesitated. They're prepping now. She's stable, but... He looked around. I can't talk. I'm sorry. Did Judith authorize the restraining order through hospital admin? His mouth tightened. He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. He stepped past me. I didn't follow. I didn't need to push. Not yet. She'd pushed enough for both of us. I sat on the bench outside the ER, fists tight, heart louder than the ambulances that screamed down the main road. Selena was inside. Our daughter was almost here, and Judith Weller had just picked a fight in the one arena she didn't control, the law. Dr. Ma didn't sleep much anymore. I could see it in the way he rubbed at the corners of his eyes, the way his coat hung a little looser than it had last month, the way he couldn't hold eye contact for more than 2 seconds. But tonight, he was cornered. By guilt, not by me. I found him on the east stairwell of Memorial Heights Hospital, the one nobody used after visiting hours. He leaned against the wall, phone in hand, not making a call, just holding it like it might shield him from what he already knew. You told me she was stable, I said from the second step, but you didn't tell me why I wasn't allowed inside. His head jerked up. His mask of professionalism cracked for a moment. I can't be involved in this. You already are. I stayed where I was. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I just let the silence between us speak for itself. Dr. Kelvin Ma had always been the kind of man who let others talk first, but tonight, his silence was louder than words. He shifted his weight, his fingers twitching at his side like he was deciding whether to run or confess. Look, he finally said, you know the HOA has a medical liaison agreement with Memorial Heights. Memorandum of Understanding, not a legally binding contract. Doesn't override patient rights or family access. He flinched. He knew I was right. I didn't sign off on the restriction, he said quietly. But it was presented to admin with a statement from the HOA board that framed it as a non-emergency civil dispute. They claimed you'd been hostile at the gate, that you refused to comply with transport protocols. They leveraged the hospital's liability policy, and you let them. His mouth opened, closed. He looked away. I was warned that if I interfered, I'd be subject to review. They said my medical judgment wasn't in question, but my professional affiliations could be reevaluated. They threatened your job. He nodded once. The light above us flickered. For a moment, he was just a man in a lab coat looking for a way out. I've delivered over 200 babies in this hospital, he said softly. Your daughter could be number 201. I should have done more. You still can? He shook his head, rubbing at his temple. They're too powerful. Not in court, they're not. His shoulders twitched, just slightly. A micro-reaction, but enough for me to know I had his attention. He was afraid, yes, but not paralyzed. You remember the new gate system? I asked. The one they installed 6 months ago? HOANET. He nodded slowly. I cloned the data stream, passive mirroring, totally legal. I've got access logs, user authentication pings, metadata packet trails. Judith altered timestamps on the system the night Selena went into labor. Her report says we left at 9:42 p.m. The gate log shows 8:13 p.m., and your intake system has a 911 call at 8:19. He stared at me, not blinking, breathing shallow. You have all that? I've already filed a pre-action preservation notice. But what I don't have yet is a statement from someone who saw the interference firsthand, or was pressured to comply. He backed up a step, hand running through his hair. Marcus, I have a family, a mortgage. They could destroy my reputation. They're already destroying lives, I said. Yours if you keep carrying their silence. Mine if I can't prove this. Selena's if something happens. Tonight, his fingers curled against his thigh. He looked down at his phone again, then pocketed it. I didn't know they were falsifying logs, he said, but I knew the restraining notice was delivered through unofficial channels. There was no hospital legal rep involved. Would you say that under oath? I don't know. I nodded. That's fair. But you need to decide soon, because once I file the injunction, your silence becomes complicity. His eyes flicked toward the stairwell door, then back to me. I'll think about it, he whispered. That wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. He walked past me, not saying another word. His steps were heavy, uneven, full of something close to shame. I stayed on the stairwell a little longer, letting the fluorescent hum fill the space between thoughts. This wasn't about catching Judith in a lie. It was about breaking the machine she built. And machines didn't fall from one blow. They cracked when pressure was applied at the right joint. Dr. Ma was that joint, and he was already bending. By morning, Judith had escalated. I woke to a formal cease and desist order delivered to the hospital's legal office, citing ongoing security concerns and failure to comply with community directives. The letterhead bore the Fox Ridge Hills HOA emblem, but the language screamed Judith, cold, overreaching, and so calculated it read more like a threat than a legal notice. Selena was still sedated, recovering from the emergency cesarean. Our daughter was in the NICU, 5 doors down, attached to more machines than I'd seen in combat hospitals. I hadn't even held her yet, because of paperwork. I walked the perimeter of the hospital parking structure, earbuds in, listening to the HOA board meeting, recording they didn't know I had. Judith's voice filtered through like static at first, but then came sharp and clear. The optics matter, she was saying. This is about precedent. If we allow emergency transport without gate clearance, it undermines the entire surveillance program. Reeves already proven hostile. We handle him now, or we lose credibility. Another voice cut in, Gary, the HOA treasurer. But his wife was hemorrhaging. This feels risky, Judith snapped. Do you want a community where protocol means something or not? That was it, that line, protocol over people. It wasn't even about Selena or the baby. Judith was trying to prove that her authority trumped everything, even medical urgency, even basic human decency. Back inside, I bypassed the hospital's guest Wi-Fi and connected through my own secure VPN node. I rerouted into the HOA's packet history from the prior night and found what I was looking for. 3 system pings from the community server to an unlisted IP at 10:17 p.m., long after Selena was admitted. Each one had Judith's admin credentials attached. She hadn't just filed the violation retroactively, she'd modified internal timestamps on gate logs to match her version of events. And here's the worst part. Someone inside the hospital network had validated it. The data showed a sync between HONet and a hospital-side intake record, an API call, one that couldn't have happened without explicit administrative approval from within Memorial Heights. Judith had someone on the inside. That was how she pulled this off. I took a screenshot of the packet trail, encrypted it, and sent it to my attorney, Vincent Elridge. He was 2 hours away, but already prepping a motion for a temporary restraining order. Then I made a second call. Not to a lawyer, to a journalist. Her name was Darlene Yu. We went to grad school together. She ran local investigations for Channel 6 and had a history of dragging HOA corruption into the light. I didn't need a news segment, I needed pressure, just enough to keep the hospital board from rolling over. When I explained what was happening, she didn't ask for permission. Marcus, if she falsified logs and used them to manipulate medical access, that's obstruction and misrepresentation. If I get even one quote from a hospital staffer confirming this influence. She's finished. You'll get your quote, I said. But first, I need you to make some noise. Done. Give me a half hour. By the time I walked past the NICU again, the hospital's risk management officer was pacing outside administration. He didn't look at me, but his phone was glued to his ear and his forehead was wet with sweat. The system was shifting. I could feel it. I stood in the hall and watched the morning sunlight spill across the tile. Machines beeped from nearby rooms. Parents murmured behind half-closed curtains. Life, in its rawest form, was being stitched together down that corridor. And Judith Weller wanted to regulate it like street parking. Back in the waiting room, the nurse handed me a copy of the updated visitation log. Things are loosening a little, she said carefully. She's stable. You'll be able to see the baby soon. My fingers curled around the paper. The date, the signature, a single phrase written near the bottom in blue ink. Review pending. Directive questioned. It wasn't a win, but it was a fracture. And machines, no matter how polished, always fail at their weakest connection. By noon, the logs were talking. HONet's traffic had never been encrypted properly, not even after Judith's so-called cyber upgrades. I'd cloned it all during the rollout. Firmware updates, MAC addresses, user pings, internal timestamp logs. It wasn't just sloppy, it was arrogant. She never imagined someone might audit the audit trail. I sat in the hospital cafe, laptop open, tethered to my portable rig. Selena was still unconscious, and our daughter, no name yet, we hadn't even gotten that far, was breathing through a CPAP in the NICU. The caffeine didn't help. My hands still shook, but the data gave me clarity. The HOA's official incident report claimed we exited our driveway at 9:42 p.m. in violation of curfew. That timestamp was echoed in the letter they submitted to Memorial Heights the same night, along with a community transportation risk assessment. The gate logs told a different story. I had them in clean rows, columns of IP pingbacks, subnet relays, and relay confirmations. The digital equivalent of a witness statement. It showed Selena's transport vehicle requested access at 8:13 p.m., and that the gate only opened after a manual override triggered by a city-registered emergency services badge. The override was time-stamped 8:15. The call to 911 came in at 8:19. By 8:32, the HOA system pushed a remote sync to the hospital's administrative server via a known endpoint Judith herself registered in the last infrastructure vote. That endpoint delivered a version of the curfew violation log, but with a forged timestamp matching 9:42. Meaning, she changed the logs after we were already admitted to the hospital. And there, in a folder the HOA thought was private, was the smoking gun. Compliance Josh log drafts, vial, rewrite, reeve. XML. A file modified at 10:17 p.m., 2 hours after the ambulance arrived, by Judith's user account, with manual edits overriding the system-generated logs. Every change was there, every falsified line, even the internal comment. Force sync timestamp with SPA's hospital for legal footing. Keep external time markers aligned. Don't use real gate logs. She didn't just doctor records. She did it knowingly. I stared at that line for a long time. My jaw ached from how tightly I was clenching it. This wasn't petty rule enforcement. It was an organized attempt to fabricate legal justification, to block me from being with my wife while she gave birth. And somewhere in this hospital, someone had accepted those falsified logs without blinking. I compiled the evidence, screenshots, file metadata, traffic logs, and the XML file itself, into a compressed archive, encrypted, uploaded to cloud storage, sent the access link to Vincent, my attorney. Then I messaged Darlene at Channel 6. It's confirmed. Tampering, falsification, active data push into medical system. I'll give you the logs if you promise one thing. You name her in the piece. First sentence, she replied in under 30 seconds. First sentence, front page, I'll have legal scrub it, but it's going live. I closed the laptop and looked out the cafe window. Parents passed with gift bags. Nurses wheeled trays. Nothing in their expressions said tyranny, but I knew better now. Tyranny doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears a pastel cardigan and calls itself president of the board. I headed back upstairs, walking past the waiting room where Judith had been the night before. Her chair was empty now, but the air still felt tight, sterile, controlled. A nurse at the NICU desk glanced up. They said you're cleared for 10 minutes, she said. We're reevaluating the restriction. I nodded, throat too tight to respond. Inside, our daughter's chest rose and fell under soft blue light. I pressed my hand to the glass. Her fingers moved like she was reaching for something in a dream. I'll fix this, I whispered. Behind me, a voice. You already started. I turned. It was Dr. Ma. He looked different. Not confident, but steadier. I need to talk to you, he said, in private. I followed him without a word, through the staff doors and into a quiet hallway. He stopped near the linen closet, away from cameras. I reviewed the intake, he said. It didn't come from legal. It came from an admin channel I've never seen used before. Internal, but not standard. I think you're right, and I think I can help. It wasn't a promise, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall, and I was going to drive a flood through it. I followed Dr. Ma through the side corridor of the NICU ward, past dim break rooms and closed supply doors until we stopped near a badge-locked maintenance stairwell. He tapped the wall like he needed something solid to lean on. I never said anything, he began, because I thought maybe it was isolated. Maybe she was bluffing, that if I just stayed out of it, the hospital would take care of the overreach. But she's gotten more aggressive since the surveillance rollout. And I see it now. This isn't about policy. It's about power. I watched his hands. They trembled slightly, fingers flexing against his coat, like they wanted to wring the truth out of themselves. This was his turning point, and I couldn't rush it. I reviewed the internal directive the board used to bar you, he continued. It was coded through an override channel labeled non-permissive entry control. That's a module we don't even use. It was part of the HOA's systems compliance update last year, under that community safety umbrella. That same update passed by 3 votes, I said. Judith campaigned for it personally. He nodded. And now it's being used to restrict hospital access. That override wasn't triggered by our legal department. It was manually submitted through an auxiliary intake path. The timestamp was 10:17 p.m., same time as her XML file edit. It locked into place. She'd sent the altered logs directly into a live system through a custom pipeline, one built specifically to masquerade as internal admin action. No one would have second-guessed it without an audit. You willing to put that in writing? I asked. Dr. Ma exhaled slowly. If you subpoena me, yes. But I won't let this hospital take the fall for what the HOA orchestrated. I'll say what I saw. I'll tell them how the order reached us, and that I questioned its source. That was all I needed, for now. As we walked back toward the elevators, I saw her, Judith, in the main lobby, framed by the morning sun, talking to a man in a tan blazer I recognized from HOA town halls, Ken Forrester, the board's legal counsel. They stood beside a clipboard, whispering like conspirators in a courtroom hallway. Her posture hadn't changed, shoulders square, lips tight, eyes scanning everything like it belonged to her. I didn't stop, but I didn't look away either. Upstairs, Selena had woken. The nurse smiled as I approached. "She's alert," she said. "Sore, but stable. She asked about you." I stepped into the room. Her eyes fluttered open, bloodshot, but locked onto mine like they'd never left. "I heard them say, 'You weren't allowed,'" she whispered. "I fixed that." Her hand found mine, weak but warm. "Is she okay?" I nodded. Small but strong. Tears traced down her cheeks. Mine too. We didn't speak for a while, just sat in the sterile quiet, hand in hand, the soft beeping of machines the only witness. Then I told her everything. Not just what happened at the gate, everything. The forged logs, the unauthorized pipeline, the live push into the hospital system, Dr. Ma's support, the lawyer, the press. When I finished, she nodded slowly, eyes fierce. "Then burn them." I kissed her hand. By that evening, Vincent had filed an emergency injunction against the HOA, including a petition to review all administrative systems used to alter or transmit health-related access logs. The motion included the XML file metadata, 3 traffic trails, and a sworn affidavit from me. Dr. Ma's official statement would come later, after we had the hearing scheduled. We didn't need a courtroom yet. We just needed a judge to look. At 6:13 p.m., the clerk confirmed a motion hearing for 9 a.m. the next day. And just like that, the fight was no longer in Judith's house. It was in mine, the law. Before I closed my laptop, I added one final line to the briefing packet. "Live evidence demo requested. Security playback log trace included." I stared at that sentence, because tomorrow everything she forged would be played back, on a screen, in front of a judge. The judge approved the hearing. 9 a.m. sharp, Fairfax County Civil Court. Vincent called me from the courthouse steps just after filing was accepted. "She's not going to expect this," he said. "You caught her mid-move. Most people wait until it's too late to document anything. What you've got is surgical. She thinks she's protected," I replied. "She always does." Back at the hospital, I stood in the hall outside the NICU, watching the blue light above my daughter's isolette pulse steady and slow. She looked stronger already, fingers twitching, lips curling around the oxygen tube like she had something to say. I wished I could hear it. Maybe she didn't know yet how hard someone tried to keep us apart. But she would. I turned at the sound of footsteps. Dr. Ma stood there, clipboard in hand, but his posture was different this time. Not nervous. Resolved. His shoulders no longer curled inward. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded, and we stepped into an empty consultation room. He closed the door behind us and didn't bother to sit. "I want to give you my statement." I blinked. "I'll put it in writing. On record, I'll testify if it comes to that. What Judith did, it wasn't just interference. It compromised patient care. I'm not going to let that live in my silence." I sat down slowly. The tension that had clung to my spine for 2 days began to ease, just barely. "You're sure? I already drafted it," he said, handing over a sealed envelope. Typed, signed, dated. My badge numbers at the bottom. I confirmed the non-permissive override route was used without approval from legal, and I included the part about Judith pressuring admin staff to comply with the HOA-issued directive. There are 2 witnesses who heard her. Will they testify? They won't speak yet. But if this becomes a deposition, their names can be subpoenaed. Until then, it's all in there. I took the envelope, felt the weight of it. This wasn't just a statement, it was the turning point. A clean professional voice confirming what the logs already said. Evidence and testimony. One mechanical, one human. The court wouldn't be able to ignore it. "I don't know what happens after this," he said, "but I can't keep pretending policy is an excuse for harm." He left before I could say, "Thank you." By the time I got back to Selena's room, her eyes were closed again. She looked peaceful, tired but peaceful. Her hand rested on a tiny pink bracelet the nurse had brought in from the NICU. I asked them if she could have a name tag, the nurse said from the doorway. Just something small. I looked down at it. Avery Reeve. Selena had named her. Avery? I smiled. A real one. The first in days. Downstairs, my phone buzzed. Darlene, Channel 6. You might want to turn on the local news at 8 tonight. We're running the HOA segment. It's not the full expose. We're saving that for after the hearing. But the public's about to know her name. And yours? I hung up and forwarded the message to Vincent. Then I scanned Dr. Ma's statement, encrypted it, and uploaded it to our court submission folder, the final piece. The evidence was ready. The statement was in. The judge had greenlit the presentation of digital materials. Judith had no idea what she was walking into, and neither did her lawyer, which was exactly how it needed to be. As I looked over Avery's name again, something clicked into place, something deeper than vengeance, cleaner than rage. This wasn't just about proving Judith wrong, it was about protecting the next family who wouldn't have my skill set, the next father who wouldn't know how to trace a packet log or secure a court order overnight. Judith thought she was dealing with a homeowner. She was dealing with a systems analyst who'd made a career out of exposing bad actors who hide behind protocol. Tomorrow, I'd show her what that looked like in court. By the time the sun rose over Fairfax County, the courthouse already felt like a chessboard, and I wasn't showing my queen until the final move. I stood outside the building with Vincent, both of us dressed for war, but only one of us with a laptop case tucked under his arm like a detonator. Everything we needed was inside. The falsified XML log, the packet trail, Dr. Ma's notarized statement, and 3 layers of metadata from the HOA's system. We'd printed nothing. Judith didn't know what we had, and we weren't going to tip her off until we were inside the walls of due process. Her attorneys already filed a motion to dismiss, Vincent said, scrolling his phone. Claims there's no standing, no jurisdiction, no material harm. She tried to keep me from my child's birth. Vincent nodded, which is why we're also arguing emergency deprivation of access under civil obstruction. Not just HOA overreach. We entered through the side lot. No media vans yet. Darlene had held back the full story, just like she promised. But I knew the news teaser would hit local feeds within the hour. Right now, Judith thought she still had the upper hand. She'd walk into that hearing expecting to debate policy and procedure. She had no idea I was about to plug a courtroom laptop into the HDMI port and play back the moment she rewrote reality. Inside the waiting chamber, I set up on a quiet bench, opened my rig, ran a last-minute hash check on the files. The XML edit matched the gate timestamp discrepancy exactly, down to the second. If the judge approved our motion to present evidence live, it would show the truth with zero interpretation, just pure data, clean and brutal. Vincent reviewed his opening statement one last time. His voice, usually calm and rehearsed, had a tension in it now. Not fear, precision. We didn't just need to win. We needed to make it irreversible. 10 minutes before the hearing, I saw her. Judith Weller, walking through the double doors like she'd just parked in her private garage. Hair ironed flat, tailored jacket, HOA pin still affixed to her lapel, like this was a neighborhood BBQ. Her lawyer followed a step behind, Ken Forrester. Gray suit, soft briefcase, permanent squint. He didn't recognize me at first. That made me smile. They sat across the aisle. Judith didn't look at me until the clerk called my name. Then she did. And I watched her expression change, not at me, but at Vincent, who stood with a confidence she hadn't anticipated. His suit wasn't as expensive. His voice wasn't as loud. But he held the truth like a scalpel. The judge arrived 5 minutes later. Rena Holstrom. Younger than expected, with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for delay. "Let's move quickly," she said. "Petitioner, you're requesting an emergency injunction against Fox Ridge Hills Homeowners Association on the basis of digitally falsified records impacting medical access. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Vincent replied. "We've submitted sealed files for verification and request permission to present live digital evidence, including metadata audit trails and a sworn professional statement." Judith whispered something to Ken. He raised his hand. "Objection. This evidence hasn't been formally disclosed prior to hearing. Defense requests full discovery delay." Vincent didn't flinch. "We're not asking for judgment today, only presentation to establish cause. The files are immutable, time-stamped, and already submitted to court storage. Your Honor can verify chain of custody independently." Hallstrom nodded. "You'll get your moment, Mr. Forrester. But if this involves obstruction of medical access, I want to see it now." She turned to me. Mr. Reeve, you're prepared? Yes, Your Honor. I plugged in the HDMI cable. The screen on the courtroom monitor flickered, then lit up. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I set the terms. I opened the first folder labeled HOA packet logs, gate access, 8:13 p.m., click. Then the XML file, click. Judith's admin signature, timestamp mismatch, manual edit, transmission route. The room went silent, save for the faint buzz of courtroom electronics. I didn't say a word. The screen was speaking loud enough. Judith's smile faded on the second screen. She leaned toward Ken Forrester and hissed something, but the audio was off and the courtroom air too thin to carry whispers. All I saw was the tight movement of her jaw, the twitch in her left eye, and the subtle forward pitch of someone who had just realized the ground wasn't beneath them anymore. The screen behind me displayed the internal comment in the XML file. Force sync timestamp or hospital for legal footing. Keep external time markers aligned. Don't use real gate logs. Hallstrom leaned forward, glasses down her nose. Who authored this? Vincent's voice was calm. The metadata tags show HOA President Judith Weller's user credentials were used. Additionally, we've traced the login path back to her home IP, verified by the HOA's own routing logs. We've included full packet captures and digital signatures, all of which confirm she altered the gate access records at 10:17 p.m. Over 2 hours after the emergency transport occurred, Ken Forrester stood. Your Honor, that data hasn't been validated by a third party. Vincent raised a hand. We anticipated that concern. We have already included a signed technical verification from a certified federal systems auditor. My client Judge Hallstrom turned to me. Mr. Reeve, you verified this information? I built the system she used, I said. Not for the HOA, for a government agency. HONET piggybacked on our open source model, stripped the encryption, and introduced vulnerabilities they didn't understand. I left a shadow log running because I suspected administrative misuse. That suspicion was correct. The judge turned back to Forrester. Do you dispute the existence of this log? He adjusted his tie. We can't, Your Honor, but we do question the interpretation. Vincent didn't give him space to breathe. Then let's discuss interpretation. He stepped toward the projector, swapped folders, and opened the second file. Hospital intake, API gateway sync. Another timestamp. 10:17 p.m. The exact moment Judith pushed the forged data into the hospital's intake system. Vincent pointed to the bottom of the screen. That pipeline was used to justify revoking Mr. Reeves' access to the delivery room. His wife was in active labor, his daughter's life was at risk, and this override was not issued by the hospital's legal department. It was issued through a custom HOA access route disguised to appear internal. Hallstrom frowned. Is this claim substantiated by the hospital? Vincent nodded. Yes, and we have a signed statement from Dr. Kelvin Ma, the attending obstetrician that night, confirming the override path used was non-standard and unfamiliar to legal or medical personnel. He handed her the affidavit, sealed, signed, dated, badge ID included. That was the preparation phase. Now came the weight drop. Vincent cleared his throat. We are not here today to press criminal charges. We are requesting an emergency injunction blocking the HOA from interfering with medical transport, administrative access, or security protocol enforcement related to the Reeve family, or any other resident of Fox Ridge Hills, pending a formal digital systems audit and board review. He let the words hang there. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the ventilation system hum. Hallstrom scanned the affidavit, then turned back to the screen. Mr. Forrester, he swallowed. We request time to independently review the technical submissions. Request denied. You'll have discovery rights if this escalates. But for now, I'm granting the injunction. She turned to the clerk. Prepare a protective order. Fox Ridge Hills HOA is barred from submitting, enforcing, or modifying any digital policy that affects public access systems or medical infrastructure until further review. Effective immediately, Judith stiffened, like someone had slammed a gavel against her spine. The judge wasn't finished. Additionally, I am referring the matter to the County Digital Forensics Division for a preliminary investigation into administrative falsification and unauthorized medical interference. If Mr. Reeves' documentation is validated under county standards, further legal action will be considered. I didn't smile, not yet, because this wasn't over. But the board had just lost control of the board. As the screen powered down, I looked over at Judith. For the first time, she looked like someone who'd finally read the fine print on her own rulebook and realized what she signed. The courthouse emptied like someone had pulled a plug. Judith didn't look at me on her way out. Forrester hovered beside her, speaking low and fast, but her face had gone mask flat. No smugness, no denial, just a mechanical nodding that told me the reality hadn't settled, but the cracks had started. Vincent and I stayed behind, finishing paperwork with the clerk. The injunction was officially filed, stamped, and distributed to all applicable departments. The HOA's access to community-linked health systems was severed. Memorial Heights would receive the order by end of day. From this point forward, they'd have to reroute everything through a verified municipal line. The machine was stalling, but machines don't stop until something breaks inside. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't sleep either. I set up in the hospital's third-floor family suite, next to Selena's room. My daughter, Avery, was moved from critical to observation. Her oxygen levels stabilized. Her heartbeat was strong. I finally held her for the first time under sterile light, cradled against my chest, her eyes barely open. She didn't cry. She just blinked once, slow and deliberate, like she'd been waiting. And so had I. The morning after the hearing, Vincent texted me at 7:12 a.m. Check the Channel 6 site. I opened the video. Darlene had gone live at midnight. The segment was clean, measured, and devastating. It opened with, a Fairfax County man was denied access to his wife's hospital room during childbirth due to falsified HOA records pushed through unauthorized digital channels. This is not fiction. It happened last week. They showed Judith's HOA credentials on the modified logs, blurring only the IP address. They interviewed Deborah, the woman whose husband had missed his dialysis months ago. Then they aired an off-record quote from a hospital staffer confirming external influence was exerted by a private organization, claiming administrative authority. No names were redacted, no sympathy was offered, just data and consequences. By noon, the HOA's emergency board meeting was trending on local feeds. Residents began circulating petitions demanding a formal vote to suspend Judith from her post-pending investigation. The board tried to stall, said a cooling-off period was necessary. That made things worse. People weren't cooling down. They were heating up. I spent that afternoon compiling a full audit report, complete with a system diagram of the HOA's communication node, data path structure, and injection vulnerability. I used it for work all the time, reporting the exact path an unauthorized user took to bypass intended barriers. I'd never written one with this much satisfaction. I titled the report, Gatekeeper Override, How HOA Policy Became Digital Tyranny. And I wasn't done. That evening, I met with a small circle of neighbors in the hospital's open-air courtyard. It wasn't formal. No one called it a meeting. It was just people who'd had enough. Deborah was there. So was Ben Kim, whose kid got fined for selling lemonade too close to the sidewalk. A nurse from the NICU sat quietly in the back. She didn't say much, just listened. I told them what happened, not just the forged logs, everything. The silence afterward wasn't fear. It was collective rage finally given direction. Ben asked, "What now?" "We rebuild the rules," I said, "or we replace the ones writing them." They nodded. When I returned to Selena's room, she was awake. Avery rested against her chest, both of them lit by soft amber from the hallway window. "She looks like your mom," she whispered. "I know." "She's going to grow up in a different neighborhood, isn't she?" I nodded. "Because you made it different." "No," I said, brushing Avery's tiny hand. "Because we did." In the quiet, I opened my email and clicked the last file Vincent had sent, our official board challenge notice. Signed by 6 residents, citing obstruction, fraud, and systemic abuse of procedural authority. We weren't asking Judith to resign. We were removing her. And this time, it wouldn't be done behind closed doors. It would be done in front of everyone, under the lights, where it belonged. They tried to hold the emergency HOA meeting behind locked doors, claimed it was a board-only procedural review, claimed the community wasn't entitled to attend until after the findings were finalized. But word had already spread, faster than they expected. louder than they could control. By the time I arrived at the Fox Ridge Hills Community Center, the lot was full, the sidewalks lined, and the folding chairs inside had all been claimed. I didn't need to sign up to speak. Everyone already knew why I was there. Vincent stood in the back, arms crossed, tie loosened. He wasn't here as my lawyer anymore. He was a witness, just like the rest of them. He'd already done his part. Judith took the podium at exactly 6 p.m., as if punctuality could shield her. She wore the same pale blue jacket from the courtroom, same HOA pin, same clipped tone. The board has reviewed recent concerns regarding data integrity, administrative overreach, and resident safety. We recognize the seriousness of these claims, and we are conducting an internal— "Save it!" someone shouted from the middle row. Judith froze. The room shifted. It wasn't chaos, not yet, but it was on the edge of boiling. "This isn't your podium anymore," said a voice from the side, Deborah, standing now. She held up the printed petition, folded and creased from use. "We have enough signatures to force a recall vote. We submitted the notice yesterday. You don't speak for this community." Murmurs rippled outward like a wave. Judith adjusted the microphone. "There is a process." "There was a process," I said, stepping forward, "until you rewrote it. Just like you rewrote those logs." All eyes turned. I wasn't here to give a speech. I was here to end one. I pulled a small drive from my pocket, raised it between two fingers. "This is the raw audit log from the night you barred me from my daughter's birth. It contains the modified gate data, the false timestamp, the unauthorized override of hospital access, and the metadata linking every change to your credentials. You pushed it through a system you voted to install. You used it not for safety, but for punishment. You used it to break a family apart on the most important night of our lives." She opened her mouth, but I kept going. "I've already played it in court. The judge granted an emergency injunction. You've been barred from interfering with medical infrastructure, and now you're going to be barred from this room." Gasps, then applause, hesitant at first, but growing. Ken Forrester stood up in the front row, trying to keep order. "You can't grandstand?" "I'm not grandstanding," I said, turning toward the screen behind the podium. "I'm playing back what she did. You want process? Here's your transparency." Vincent stepped forward, connected my laptop to the projector. The screen lit up. The XML file appeared first, then the hospital access route logs. Then Dr. Ma's statement, digitally signed and verified by county records. Every entry appeared like a drumbeat. The room went quiet. Judith gripped the edge of the podium like it might hold her upright. I stepped aside, said nothing more. Then a woman from the back rose. HOA member. I didn't know her name. I moved to vote for the immediate suspension and removal of Judith Weller as board president, effective tonight. "I second," someone else said. "Majority vote required," Ken said quickly, already scanning the room. But it was done. Hands raised, row by row, section by section. When they finished counting, it wasn't even close. Judith didn't move, not at first. Then she walked out without a word, shoulders rigid, never once looking back. The screen behind her went black. I unplugged the drive and pocketed it. That was evidence once. Now it was history. Outside, the air was humid, summer on its way in. I stood by the swing set behind the center, hands on the rusted chains. Selena used to bring me lemonade here when I rebuilt the broken bench. The same bench Avery would sit on one day. The one with her grandfather's name carved beneath the wood. Vincent walked up beside me. "They're drafting the notice now." I nodded. "Good." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Hell of a thing you did." "No," I said. "It was overdue." And for the first time in weeks, the sky didn't feel heavy. It felt like home. They repainted the welcome home bench 3 days after the vote. The old varnish had cracked under years of weather. An HOA neglect, but the wood held strong. Selena sat beside me while Avery slept against her chest, a bundle of soft breaths and cotton blanket. The air smelled of cut grass and cedar oil, fresh, honest, real. I ran my hand over the newly etched lettering at the back of the bench. My dad's original carving, his initials, had been left untouched, but beneath it, the community added something new. For Avery. Born free. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a reckoning. Fox Ridge Hills had changed. Not overnight, not cleanly, but permanently. The board held a second vote 2 days after Judith walked out. New leadership was elected, residents who cared more about families than fences. The medical override system was dismantled entirely. The HOA's contract with HOANet was voided, and a third-party audit was launched into every policy pushed during Judith's presidency. Dr. Ma received a formal apology from hospital administration. He didn't say much about it, just nodded when I shook his hand outside the NICU, as if that was enough. Sometimes silence means peace. Other times, it means the war is over. I still had copies of everything, every log, every override, every meeting transcript. I didn't delete them. I archived them under a single folder labeled Proof That Silence Isn't Safety. Selena asked me, a few nights later, if I thought Judith would face criminal charges. Maybe, I said. Depends on what the digital forensics team finds. But that's not my part to play anymore. She looked relieved, not because it was over, because we didn't let it define us. When I visited the HOA office one last time to sign off on the public release of all board records, Transparency Initiative, they called it, I found Judith's nameplate in the trash bin, still clean, still gold trimmed. I didn't touch it. Let the past rot in its own pride. As for Avery, she thrived. The doctor said she came early, but strong. Her lungs cleared faster than expected. She started eating on day 5, gripping Selena's finger with surprising strength. That girl had fought to be born with half the neighborhood standing in her way, and she came through like a storm that refused to wait for permission. I whispered something to her the night we brought her home. Not a promise, a warning. They'll never get this close again. Because some people think HOA means power. They forget what it means when people stand up, document everything, and refuse to let the silence win. I left one final post on the community board before logging off for good. A picture of the bench, a snapshot of Avery's tiny hand against my chest, and the caption, "This is what accountability looks like. This is what home should feel like." And now, I'm asking you, have you been through something like this? Did someone in power try to use rules to rewrite reality? If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now. Share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.